vision as it relates to this technology and kind of this newer entrant to the airspace system to some degree. So today we're going to be talking about a lot of things related to engagement. So FAA has been engaging with UAS and on this topic for a while. We're going to talk with you also about some unmanned traffic management specific to ARP and the ARP division, some research on UAS and drones use. And of course, we have Geo with us that'll be a great resource for you all to hear from a LEAP standpoint. So if you're not familiar with the Law Enforcement Assistance Program, Geo is going to be able to dive into how that relates to also, this kind of this new entrant, and then we'll end things with hearing from Eric and kind of trying to engage with you all and not having just a bunch of PowerPoint slides that we're working through. Really trying to pull you all and learn from your perspective how UAS is maybe impacting you and things that you're doing. So at a high level, look, FAA is really working towards trying to integrate UAS within the airspace system. And this is something that really dates back to 2012 and the FAA Modernization and Reform Act, and really coming out of Congress, the initiative that FAA needs to develop a plan on how to integrate this new technology. So since then, and going back to, kind of branching from that concept and for that plan, we've gone from Section 333 exemptions to Part 107 to now we're seeing near real-time, basically near real-time authorization approvals that can happen if you're in maybe wanting to operate around a controlled airport and that environment. So different resources that are available. If you haven't seen before, UAS, there's a UAS symposium that FAA holds. And this has been kind of an annual event now for some time. They've broken it up the past 2 years into different episodes is what they're calling it. So you may enjoy some of the Star Wars reference there, episode 1, 2, 3, 4, those types of things. But a lot of good information can be found in these symposiums. So it's a combination of FAA and stakeholders, industry stakeholders coming together. AUVSI is one of the main proponents as well that initiates this kind of conference. So in years past, it has been in person, past 2 years, and actually I should say last year and then this year it'll be virtual. But even resources such as Before You Fly and the I Fly Safe campaign, there's a lot of things that FAA has been pushing to try to help not only introduce this new technology and from a safe standpoint in the airspace environment, but also help with the public outreach and education too, because there's still out there a lot that there's a lot of questions that folks have. One other thing I'll mention is the Know Before You Fly campaign as well. So these are different things that are worth looking into. And another solid resource, believe it or not, is FAA's website. So FAA has their, I think it's just faa.gov/UAS. Very simple to remember. You go there, and if you're receiving questions, so Lance, I know you said that you get folks reaching out to you and wondering, hey, can I operate this UAS near the airport, or is it possible to operate on the airport? On the FAA's website, they've done a really good job of organizing information to help answer some of these questions based upon a series of just kind of simple inquiries of what type of operator are you looking to be, what type of operation might you be looking to perform depending on the operator you are. So, and another thing I'll mention, they're doing a great job. The team that manages the website, they're doing a great job of keeping that information current too. So with that, I'll just kind of continue on to talk about really kind of the next segment, and it's unmanned traffic management. So unmanned traffic management really is something that's kind of a broader, it's really a part of a broader effort that ties in with urban air mobility and also AAM. So long-term, FAA's goal, you can think about it like this, is we want to be able to integrate, not segregate UAS in the NAS, right? So I mentioned to you before, we kind of been progressing over the past decade or so in seeing the authorization approval for UAS get more streamlined and become more everyday. Even to include our low altitude authorization notification capabilities around our towered airports. So some of you probably are aware, if you're at a towered facility, great, you have these UAS facility maps. Those are good to reference. But that has helped a lot in terms of achieving UTM. and this concept and framework. And more recently, I'm sure you all have heard about, remote ID, the remote rulemaking that has come out with that. The kind of going by the wayside, more or less, some of the waivers that were required for nighttime ops or ops over people. There are still, it's not just kind of a blanket. This has now gone away because of the rulemaking. There's certain categorical changes, or I guess there's a categorical applications depending on the platform and where you are. So important to keep in mind. Those things didn't just disappear, but there's a way and a path now that is kind of coming to fruition to, again, help with the segregation, or excuse me, the integration of UAS in the NAS. So we're really excited about UTM, and think about it like this. It's a concept and a framework that we believe there's going to be an opportunity where you can truly have your folks that are flying these platforms on your airport for maybe an on-airport purpose and need. Maybe you all and your ops folks or somebody within your organization is using this equipment if you're not already. And then, maybe just a few miles away, you could have a group of, recreational hobbyist users of this aircraft, right? All accessing in the same general area, airspace, and you have manned air traffic flying in and out too. So we're making great strides to kind of see this true integration concept within the airspace system. So I'm going to pivot now and talk about, I was mentioning some of those on-airport cases. And some of you folks may already be plugged in on these, or maybe you're working with your contractors to some degree to have some UAS operations on your airport. Well, we, through our tech center, FAA is now working to perform some very focused research. And right now it's going to be in 5 buckets. So, and not any particular order of importance or magnitude necessarily, but we're investigating the on-airport UAS uses and really kind of benefits to you all for ARC, if that applies to your airport, perimeter security, wildlife mitigation, pavement inspection, obstacle analysis. So really, these are kind of the core applications for UAS in the airport environment we've currently identified. I think we'll probably see some extensions of that reach over into even kind of project tracking, right? So over time, what has been the progress for maybe some development projects that are happening on airports? But really, we kind of we're doing this with industry leaders and looking into different types of opportunities with stakeholders. There was recently a broad agency announcement to kind of solicit what the interest is from a vendor standpoint to do this research with our tech center folks. So digging in a little bit further on that, I'm just going to scroll through a couple of slides just for visual purposes. I talk about this, but really up until recently, right, firefighters have been able to observe events only from, say, the cab, right, of a rescue vehicle. But now with UAS and the sensor suite capabilities that they have, they might be able to capture live video during an actual event to help make them make better decisions on how to react to whatever the incident is. So certainly ties into the opportunity to help save lives in the event that that's what the situation calls for. And so anything from infrared or different types of sensor suites are capable to put on these platforms. And I know, again, to all of you or to many of you, this may not be new information. Maybe you all are exploring these opportunities already, but again, from a tech ops or an FAA headquarters standpoint, we're starting to really dig into the research applications for this technology. Another thing is perimeter security, right? I mean, so this is going to be this is actually pretty interesting from the standpoint of, you can fly very specific grids and tracks to notice people. I'm going to play a video here. Hopefully that comes through smooth on your end as well. But, being able to launch one of these platforms and examine an area efficiently, whether it's, someone outside the fence line, inside the fence line, daytime, nighttime. This is, there's obviously going to be an opportunity to utilize this capability and this equipment for these types of purposes. So we're excited to explore those further. Next is wildlife mitigation. And so I'll go ahead and mention that this is something that through a partnership with USDA, and certainly keep in mind, some of the sensitivities for, engaging with wildlife in terms of, depredation or even just mitigation, making sure that working with our partnership with USDA to go about this the right way. But we know that wildlife strikes can pose a significant risk to our aircraft. And here's a great opportunity. I'll play another video where you basically have an unmanned aircraft that looks like a bird of prey that can fly around and mitigate some of the potential wildlife hazards on an airport. So this is all kind of in the beginning stages in terms of this research. So we don't have really kind of any conclusions that have come as a byproduct of this, but moving on to that, another component is the airfield pavement inspections. So really about 70% of our AIP grants every year are allocated to work on airfield pavements. So think about that. So this is probably of all the research that's being done, and maybe one of the capabilities of this technology is there's a lot of promise to help better understand and maybe better plan for through data collection through this type of platform related to pavement condition, how we can better respond. Whether it's working in conjunction with weather patterns at airports, tying that into data collection efforts as UAS and how the pavement condition works, and maybe kind of the degradation over time. This will be a really interesting outcome of the research, see how pavement inspection can improve through high resolution imagery of this kind. And obstruction analysis. So actually even recently here in the Southwest region, there was a flight not too long ago down at an airport in Texas looking to identify how UAS can be used for obstruction analysis and how man-made and non-man-made structures are possibly penetrating approach surfaces and things of that nature into an airport. So what that kind of looks like is, you're seeing right now, this looks pretty familiar, I'm sure, to a lot of you, especially if you get up and fly, is looking down the end of the runway. But really this visual just basically kind of explains, hey, how is this maybe being accomplished? And really it is just flying a simple flight path. It's a grid that these unmanned aircraft are flying. So once they go and take high resolution images, you can go on the back end, kind of post-process, or sometimes in the field near real time, process imagery and data, digital surface models, digital terrain models, and identify, what is going to be the impact potentially to any sort of changes to an approach or surfaces and things of that nature. So moving on to really kind of the next segment of the airport research that's occurring, so the growth of the UAS industry and this activity near and around our airports, there's been concerns tied to that. And we've heard about different airports around the world that have had to shut down operations because of concerns for a UAS operating in their airspace. So whether it was a large international airport or even the smaller GAs, there's kind of a shared sentiment of concern. And really, as a kind of an extension of that, in the 2018 reauthorization for FAA, there's a section of the legislation called 383. And what it calls for is FAA to do research on detection and mitigation platforms for UAS. And some different things that you can see here on the slide, detection systems, they are allowed at airports. Maybe many of you have actually even been approached by vendors to have conversations about detection or mitigation systems. So really a little bit about kind of the overall goal of the Section 383 research is really we as an FAA want to work with industry stakeholders. There's been a solicitation that was just recently wrapped up, and we'll share these PowerPoint slides with you all, and you'll see there's a link there there's been 5 airports, host airports that'll be a part of the research for the UAS detection and mitigation efforts. But really, we want to identify opportunities to detect and mitigate potential risks posed by errant drones or hostile UAS operations, right? I mean, that's the end game. What goes with that process is also evaluating what the potential impacts are to different nav aids or other infrastructure on the airport. So some of these detection sensors are more active in nature versus passive in the way that they're using their sensors to detect activity and things like that. I'll mention to you though the 5 airports. If you're interested, you can click on that link. But effectively, there's Atlantic City Airport, which is essentially where the tech center is located. Another airport that will be involved in this research is Syracuse Hancock up in New York. There's also Rickenbacker International Airport, Columbus, Ohio, Huntsville International in Huntsville, Alabama, not Huntsville, Texas, and then Seattle-Tacoma, SeaTac up there in Washington. So in case you were interested, those are the 5 airports that were selected. So I know there was a lot of interest throughout the country, and really, although 5 airports were going to be selected for this, in actuality, it was kind of only 4 because the tech center and their airport up in Atlantic City International Airport up in New Jersey, that really needed to be kind of the base hub for the initial push and rollout of this effort. So expanding a little bit more on the research, really it's kind of transformed into, if you want to think about it like that, really kind of a 5-phase effort. We're only at phase 1. So phase 1 is going through this initial push to do the research. And then after that research occurs over the next couple of years, then it'll go through the process of working through different lines of businesses and different offices in FAA in terms of aviation rulemaking. That can include, say, the Offices of Security and Hazardous Materials, OAS, looking for plan certification and authorization of the mitigation systems, all the way to really the 5th phase. And this is one that may be of most interest to you all, so we're a little bit ways out, is actually implementing AIP funding perhaps for those technologies or those platforms that are identified through the research, right? So we're still a ways before we get there, but long term, the goal is to through this research and through this evaluation, to identify what are those technologies that actually work well in our airport environments. And to give you an idea of the detection systems, really, like I was saying, they kind of cover the gamut of, they can be very complex or very simple. And you can see the dollar amount really associated with each, it kind of goes hand in hand. So if it's just a simple detection of motion or acoustical sensors, that's really kind of more on the passive side. And then you get a lot more, I guess you could say there's more active detection and sensors. And sometimes it's a combination of passive and active sensors, using radar and different LiDAR capabilities as well. So again, very exciting. We're excited about the research and what ultimately it's going to lead to by the way of recommendations and requirements, and seeing how maybe, surveys at airport and airport inspection and mitigating wildlife, all these things I know at least we internally are excited about, and I think we've seen some of the energy externally as well, and the enthusiasm from airports and wanting to be a part of this in any way they can. So a couple things that we wanted to leave you all with for this section of the PowerPoint. It's just some example grant assurances that really kind of apply here. So there's legal precedence that UAS are actually, they're considered an aeronautical activity. They're considered an aircraft. So it's important to keep in mind that, there is a framework in place through FAA for the authorization for them to access airspace. So there may be times where there's maybe a level of consternation or caution about a UAS operator near an airport. And that's when, it's really good to reach out to folks. So you're going to hear from Gio here in a second. Reach out to your lead folks, reach out to your FSDO, and even through FAA's website, there's a UAS help desk. So really kind of for all things related to questions about UAS, of course, we here in Airports Division are here, we'll be here to help as well. So you can reach out to your ADOs, reach out to the regional office. We can get you plugged in if you have questions, but wanted to offer that as a resource as well. So keep in mind, there's grant assurances that apply to you all as the airport community. And again, our goal, at least with FAA, is we want to see the integration of this technology into the NAS and see kind of the fruitful benefits, even from the research that we're conducting, and how that can come into play for your airports and at your facilities. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass the reins to Gio.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, everybody. Lance, thank you for having me on board. I think you and I met a few years ago when I visited your airport.
I'm pretty sure we did, Geo, and it was under good circumstances. I wasn't getting yelled at for something I did wrong with UAS operations. So thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you. Again, my name is Gianfranco Medina. I am a special agent with the LEAP office with ASH. Next slide. And basically what I'm going to be talking about exactly what our LEAP entails and what is our role within ASH. So the ASH's role is going to be FAA Office Security and Hazard Materials, provides a number of services to the FAA and the aviation communities to ensure the aviation safety, support national security, and promote an efficient airspace system. So AXE 700, there are regulatory investigators by investigating airmen with specific alcohol or drug-related criminal offenses, including driving while under the influence. And for 800, which I work on, there's going to be the Law Enforcement Assistance Program on the assurance of safety and security of the NAS by denying access of aircraft and individuals transporting illicit drugs, committing criminal acts, or otherwise posing a threat to national security by violating FAA regulations and US code. Okay, so we are mandated by Congress to assist law enforcement agencies in investigations involving aircraft and FAA certificated individuals. Before I was employed with the FAA, I was a police officer back in Georgia. I was a police officer for 10 years. During the academy and my time with the agencies, they never taught us any kind of general aviation things that we're able to do, especially with the jurisdiction. For instance, where I worked there was Kennesaw. It's just outside north of Atlanta. And we didn't know, even as officers, we had jurisdiction inside the airports. The first thing, of course, all officers comes to their mind is like, well, that must be FAA. They must have somebody who must be TSA. But a lot of officers and agencies don't understand that they do have jurisdiction and they do have authority to be at the airports. So obviously, if you do have something, those are the people you will need to contact. And we work side to side. And I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit briefly about that. Next slide. So this is going to be a joint incident reporting. This is something that's very good to have handy. And these are things that we actually provide to our law enforcement agencies on how to identify and report incidents for any kind of joint activities. So obviously we're going to be in the central region, and that's going to be the direct numbers for them to reach the regional operations center. So our FAA 2150, this is the authority or policy in which we're undercovered. Statutory authorities and enforcement responsibilities with the FAA offices are compliance and enforcement structures. We coordinate with other agencies, investigations of violations, special circumstances in investigation. Basically, it's criminal investigations. Something that I need to advise, even though I am a special agent, we work on regulatory investigations. I'm not a criminal investigator. And that's the beauty about this program under ASH, is that we work along with law enforcement agencies, meaning that we work on the regulatory side. And when it comes to the criminal, we work along with them and assist them in their investigation. So any kind of documents and things of that nature, we'll be able to assist them. But we work parallel with each other. So obviously, if they cannot do anything on the criminal side, the FAA can definitely do something about that if there's any kind of wrongdoing in the regulatory side. So the responsibility investigation and falsifications of airmen applications, registration violations, which is going to be under our order 2150, and importance of coordination. Now, the importance of the coordinations in the lots that we have is going to be law enforcement referrals. We provide these referrals to our appropriate federal, state, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies regarding any criminal activity by any aircraft or individuals in the NAS or support in any criminal investigation. So we work hand in hand a lot with, obviously, our big brothers going to be DOT, OIG. Then we work along with DEA, HSI, AMOC, Air Marines Operations, DEA, and local law enforcement agencies. And this is something that is going to be very good for us and for you at the general aviation airports, in case if you want to do a tabletop exercise. Now, what a tabletop exercise consists of? So we will work along with our law enforcement agencies. We will work with our federal and our local, because they obviously going to be the first responders to the airport if anything were to happen. So when we have these tabletop exercise, we can go ahead and talk amongst each other, the airport directors, the management, will have law enforcement, and see what would happen if there was a UAS, say, a posting threat to the airport. What can we do about it? So these are steps that we educate our law enforcement agencies to be proactive instead of being reactive. And that's the last thing we want, to be a reactive type of agency, or in this, especially in the country that we're living in, we want to be proactive. And just in case, we know how to go ahead and nip this by the bud. Next slide. Again, we do train our officers. We provide accredited training to our federal, state, and local agencies in the following fields. We do general aviation smuggling training, the aviation airport awareness for law enforcement, the laser basic, and UAS basic. So there's going to be sometimes that some people's going to be operating their drones in a reckless or unsafe manner, and who knows what's behind the actual operation if they're posing a threat. And these are things that we take initiative and train our officers, and they're going to be the first contact. So that way, when they were to be called, they won't be struggling. Like, what do I do? How do I do this? And if they have any questions, I'm going to be the direct point of contact as I cover for the state of Oklahoma. Something I didn't mention, with the LEAP program, there's about 15 LEAP agents nationwide. So it's not many of us in the country. However, we are covering all the states, and Oklahoma being my area of responsibility, I cover 3 states. This is Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. So anything that comes to any kind of criminal activity or anything that's regarding any general aviation, I'm going to be the direct contact, and I'll be able to assist law enforcement agencies if they have any questions. So for the laser and UAS incidents, in many cases, it's going to be the initial point of contact, law enforcement regarding non-compliant UAS operations and use of lasers against aircraft, and will refer these incidents to the appropriate flight standards office. So what happens when the call gets reported? So what happens when the pilot reports the laser UAS incidents to the air traffic? So the air traffic then reports that to law enforcement agencies. Law enforcement agencies may respond depending on the jurisdiction. Oklahoma City, being a bigger city, bigger municipality, it might take time for them to respond, and that'd be like a low-level call. So a lot of times they won't be able to respond. On your smaller rural areas, most likely they'll be able to respond quickly, or it depends on the sheriff. I mean, how fast, how far they are on the area. But if they were to get the information, what we do is we contact the law enforcement agency and see if we can get the information who was contacted and see, and then we'll refer that matter to our flight standards office for their investigation if there was any wrongdoing. And in other words, it could be law enforcement notifies UAS and laser events, and then we respond. Law enforcement contacts the local FAA regional operation center, which is going to be our central, and then they contact us, the LEAP agents. LEAP will respond to the reporting law enforcement agencies to determine if a suspect was identified. We then refer this matter to our flight standards office for their investigation. So this concludes our small brief summary for the LEAP program. So I just want to see if anybody has any questions for me, or if anybody has any comments they would like to have regarding any kind of tabletop exercise that your agency would like to have, your airports with your local agencies. You can contact me, but at this time, I will leave it off to Mike.
Helps if I unmute myself here. Thank you, Gio. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and start typing your questions. I know you have lots of them. Start typing your questions into the chat. But in the meantime, I know I have a couple questions. Gio, if an airport wants this training done in their town, how do we start this process? Is it just a simple email to you? Do you need information from our airports? And to expand a little further, are there airports that are more in favor from your department than others? Meaning, are you going to focus on commercial service airports, or are you going to, if a GA airport out in the middle of Oklahoma calls for one, would you be willing to do training out there as well?
So that's a great question, Lance. So our commercial airports, we actually have the TSA folks that's at the commercial airports, which leads the general aviation airports to the FAA. So we're heavy on the general aviation airports since they have a little bit more security aspect on commercial. We work on the general aviation. For me, it doesn't matter where it is. It could be in the middle of the rural areas of Oklahoma or in a nice fancy area. For me, it doesn't cost anything. That's part of our program. If they would like to email me and contact me, I'll be able to arrange something toward the local agencies, being with the police department or the sheriff or even a tribal, and see if we can gather some kind of tabletop exercise. I will also probably most likely contact Homeland Security and the FBI, so that way they can chime in just in case if they need to get involved. Because with those kind of agencies, they actually have a counter UAS that they're able to operate just in case of an emergency if they need to be on standby.
Okay, that's fantastic. I know at our airport that's extremely important. We've been mulling around the idea of how do we operate or issue a tabletop exercise like what you're describing, and this will be a fantastic starting base for our airport, as well as I'm sure other airports across the state.
Yes.
I have a question coming in here from Grayson Arties. Drones are great assets, especially in surveying realm, but will there be any movements by FAA to allow these surveys collected by UAS to be used for the development of AIP projects or flight procedure development? So Mike or Eric, this might come to one of you two.
Yeah, and so Gracie, the answer to that question is yes. So we're exploring right now how these systems can be used to, show kind of the example for looking at how obstacles might be an impact to an approach or kind of the safety environment, looking at the application for also how UAS may be used as a part of Aegis surveys, which would tie into specifically to, or one element of Aegis surveys that you can go out and get is obviously flight procedure development, amongst other things, planning related, development related. So that is an untapped potential that we're exploring.
I would agree. I never knew the benefit of UASs until you showed your photo on your PowerPoint there, Mike, that shows the GIS representation that you can take of a RPZ for your runway, or perhaps the detailed photos of your runway to be able to track each crack that is formed on your facility. So that they offer a lot of good information that are moving forward and can be greatly helpful, especially when it comes to AIP projects for eligibility. So thank you, Mike. Another question here, and I'm sure every airport manager across the state has gotten this, and I want to kind of throw it out there to you two, but I'm an airport manager. I get calls all the time. What am I supposed to tell someone when they call me about flying a drone around an airport? And can you answer that question from the side of a towered airport and also the side of a non-towered airport? Because there are two different kind of requirements that you have to follow depending on which airport you're around.
Yeah, so for a towered airport environment, and kind of alluded to this earlier, so as we've kind of seen the progression of this technology being incorporated into the NAS, it's been kind of a process where, think about it in terms of crawl before you walk before you run, that type of thing. So we're getting to that point, I think, from an airspace authorizational proof standpoint, where around towered facilities, if you're looking to operate, say, outside the fence line, then more than likely there's probably some sort of facility map, or if you haven't seen one of those, basically what that looks like is there's a grid around your airport with different AGL altitudes that really have kind of been pre-vetted for. So if somebody wanted to come and operate just outside your fence line or nearby the fence line, if you want to think about it like that, the closer they are to the airport, then the lower that altitude is that they can kind of have that streamline authorizational approval through that LANCE framework, through the UAS facility maps. If you're going to be looking to operate, or if an operator calls and they want to deviate from that, well, then there's going to be some additional coordination needed from a airspace authorization standpoint. So if you're at a non-towered airport environment, though, really there's, depending on and really kind of the important thing to keep in mind is certainly, where you're going to be operating in, and then what type of operation it is as well. So there's been in the past, your recreational hobbyist users versus your Part 107 operators versus your public agencies operating under a certificate of authorization or a waiver for that type of authority, and them self-certifying under, say, a public agency COA that they're meeting FAA rules and regulations. So there's the answer to the question is it can depend. And so what I would do is mention to you that there's resources on FAA.gov/UAS. There's a great breakdown of the different types of operations categorically that FAA looks at, and then by extension of that, how an operator may be wanting to take off, land, launch, recover, whatever you want to call it, nearby your airport. So I would point those people or even yourselves to the content that FAA has online. Also, though, like I said, there's your local flight standards district office. Contact your local FSDO, or send out maybe if you receive a series of questions you don't know the answer to. FAA has an online help desk for UAS as well, and they are very responsive. They're able to quickly answer questions that may come from the field. So hope that provides a little bit more perspective. And like I've said before, of course, if you have questions around your airport, reach out to us in airports. It's hard to make very objective blanket statements because every scenario might be a little bit different. So I'm kind of answering the question, but kind of not. It's because as you start fielding these types of queries from time to time, the devil's in the details, right? But in general, I think start off with the resources that FAA has made available online, and certainly reach out to your ADOs if you want to get plugged in that way through somebody in FAA internally.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, Aaron is our local contact out of our FSDO here in Oklahoma City. He's fantastic to work with. For the airports on the call, make sure you're working with your local FSDO on UAS questions or UAS issues. They can help you with both. Another question I had for you guys is, well, before I get there, I'd also like to circle back to the LANCE system that you described. I want to make a joke here. I know you didn't name it, but thanks a lot for naming it the LANCE system. Okay, super difficult to explain to my bosses. It's fantastic, especially over an email format. So just slight joke there. Another question we had is, and this might be for Gio, but for our specific airport here at Westheimer, we actually have a drone detection system, not located on airport property, but located on the property of the university. It was purchased for the purpose of game days and ensuring that we don't have any unexpected drones around our game day events. If we have, through this application, I see people breaking the rules all day. I've had as high as 2,400 AGL on this drone detection system. When we see things like this, or we hear issues of people egregiously breaking the rules set forth by UAS, do we need to contact our FSDO on that? Do we need to bring GEO in on that? Our local law enforcement? What should be our process as airport managers for when we see or hear of UAS issues around our facility?
That's a great question. What I would suggest is definitely contact your flight standards, and it's going to be a UAS person who will be able to assist them. But also, we have to be mindful on the kind of applications or equipment that is being used, because as right now, any kind of detection, especially when it comes from the federal government side of it, we have to be careful in that we're not violating any kind of Fourth Amendment. Sure. Because once we interfere in any kind of aspect of how do we obtain information or where do we obtain this information, that will be thrown out the courts, and then we're looking at possible domino effect of even being tighter So this is something we have to be mindful and being careful of. Obviously, private entities are able to do things that federal governments, they hold us on a higher accountable, and we have to go within our regulations and not violate any kind of constitutional rights. But definitely contact the FSDO, or if things like that information, they say anything like that, definitely contact the law enforcement agencies, because they'll be the first responders saying, hey, listen, this is the information we know we're getting, how they got the information, but give them as much information they can, see if they can identify the subject. And as long as we can identify the operator who is possibly operating these UAS, obtain that information, give it to the FSDO, or they can email it to me, and I can go ahead and provide that information to our FSDO, and they can start an investigation process.
Okay, perfect. And that's fantastic news, and kind of what we've been focusing on here at the university is what's private information and all that. But when we have someone who's over university property at such a high altitude, I've had the question from our OUPD on what can we do? And my first thought was call FSDO. So I'm glad we're on the right track there. So, yes. Eric, I believe you had some questions coming up, or poll questions for the group.
Yes, sir. Let's see, if we don't have any more questions for us, we would like to ask the audience for a couple of questions, just basically with these, we call it a listen and learn, but at the same time, we're trying to just gather information to see what is it that our audience want to hear? What do our sponsors want to hear? What information, what more information can we give out that's interesting to you guys? So if you think about when Mike first started off his presentation, he talked about the 5 different applications that FAA Tech Center is working on. That's from the ARF, the pavement, wildlife, obstacle, perimeter security. If you could, Lance, do you have a poll question that we could put up for that one?
I kind of have to do them one by one. So here comes your first question.
Perfect. All right. So if you guys can, again, this is kind of fun. It's fun to play around with. Oh yeah, there we go. We're starting the voting already. I love it. Yep. And it's funny, one of the briefings that we gave a couple of weeks ago, ARF didn't score as high, and then somebody actually chimed in and was like, hey, we don't have ARF. You know what I'm saying? Or we don't have the money to fund it. So that made a big difference in what audience, who we were talking to. Was it, Air Carrier 139 versus GA,
sure.
That type stuff. So as we see here, ARF is, dropping down pretty low. So it's probably for the same reason.
I would think so. Most of our users are engineering firms or consultants are GA airports. As you're aware, we only have 4 in the state. So I get you. I can almost guess the 4 that are voting for the ARF.
That's pretty cool. Like I said, so obstacle and pavement. And I think, again, I think those are going to be some great things. As Mike was talking about, and even Lance, you were saying that you wasn't aware of some of that stuff out there that was coming on board. So again, we appreciate that feedback there. All right. Let's let me go ahead and go to number 2.
Yes, sir.
All right, this one, and it's funny because, like I said, Lance was talking about having a detection system outside of his airport, but we're just trying to figure out, okay, do you have one out there? And again, we don't know, who's putting in what, so to speak. I know some people are kind of leery about, letting security purposes saying, hey, yes, we have a detection system, but I'm just trying to figure out, are you interested in the detection system, and do you have one installed? And if anybody wanted to put in the Q&A, go ahead, Mike, I see you coming on as well, but anybody want to put in the Q&A, you can, elaborate on that or give us a little bit more detail if you want to. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and I think just on this point, for the sake of perspective, what we were sort of alluding to earlier in the presentation is we've been hearing about a lot of these different types of systems that folks are being approached by vendors. So our airport sponsors, airport community being approached by vendors to install. detection and mitigation systems. And whether it's on airport or maybe even immediately off the airport, we just encourage you folks to reach out to your ADOs and work through the process with us on the front end as much as you can and you're comfortable. And the reason being is depending on the system and its capabilities, it may be more passive in nature, or if it has more active components in terms of detection that could potentially impact the navaids. There's a process that we have with headquarters to evaluate the systems in terms of OAAA. So looking at those electromagnetic interference impacts and basically offering information about your system in a way that we're actually not sharing it publicly because there are some sensitivities about the systems and their capabilities that we don't necessarily want to share, right, more broadly. So again, if you all are exploring or looking to explore having one of these systems on your airport, feel free to reach out to your ADO and let us know. We're happy to help walk alongside you through the process and make sure that we're taking the appropriate things into consideration from a technology standpoint and also potential impacts to the airport standpoint as well. Thanks, Eric.
I'd be curious, Mike, that let's say that if it is eligible for AIP funding, this, what we're seeing right here might all of a sudden switch up. It might be 88 or 90% yes versus 13%, no, so to speak. But I think once we get to that point, we'll see. And that might be one of the questions I'll end up putting into this mix here. So,
yeah.
All right. Poll number 3.
Question 3 coming up.
Right. Well, this one, Lance had talked about, not Lance, I'm sorry. Gio had talked about this during his briefing as far as the tabletop exercises. Have you had any tabletop exercises either within your community or on your airport? And, or as we say there, do you plan on having any in the future? And I think now that Gio has kind of given his assistance, so to speak, might have a little bit more, but I see here we were about, half and half, 50-50, so to speak. So it's kind of cool. And correct me if Lance, if somebody, I keep saying Lance, Gio, somebody actually was going to have a tabletop exercise at their airport. Would you guys like to be notified or like to know about it?
Oh, yes, for sure. We would definitely like to be notified so that way we can report it back to headquarters, just to let them know that, hey, we're having a tabletop exercise. This is the airport. These are the law enforcement agencies that were contacted. So that way everyone is aware. Because other agencies are already doing the tabletop exercises outside Oklahoma, and they just want to be notified so that way everybody is on the same page.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Poll number 4, please. All right, now I'm probably gonna ask Gio to pop back on again. I switched it up from the last time I asked this question, but if there's a drone incident that takes place, who would you contact? And Gio, you talked about it a little bit, but can you, I guess, explain in what situation would you contact for who? You know what I'm saying? When would you contact local versus flight standards versus the air traffic or the ROC?
Yes. So my advice would be if it looks suspicious or if it looks kind of like out of the norm that that operator is not supposed to be there, definitely call your local law enforcement agencies. Local law enforcement agencies now have the right to RAM check, just like airports, they know about the RAM checks. UAS operators do know they can be RAM checked. So every UAS needs to be registered. That's to begin with. So law enforcement does not have the authority to enforce that, but they have a right to question that. And that's where the FAA can get involved. We can start the first process of the investigation to see if that registration has actually been registered or not. Now, has there been any kind of enforcement in place of that? That's a question for FSDO. They might have an answer to. But any kind of information like that, we work along with law enforcement, and that's being pushed to a FSDO so they can start the investigation process. It could be a lot of more of kind of like Mike was saying, crawl, walk, and run. A lot of these operators are first-time operators. They don't know the regulations. So it's just basically education in the community on letting them know what they need, how to operate, where to operate. Now, if they're doing it in a reckless manner, if they're doing it where there might be a threat, definitely law enforcement needs to be notified. We're going to work along with them. And then FISDO and law enforcement would take regulatory and criminal enforcement action on the subject.
Right, thank you. And I see somebody put in the comments, it depends. I like, because Mike says that, says it a couple of times as well, it depends. But yeah, 139, you guys have to contact TSA. So, and Mike, did you have anything to add?
No, nothing real substance. I just looking at the polling results. I think we have over 60 folks that are tuned in, but we're maybe seeing not as many of responses coming through. So Lance, I don't know if this will encourage more polling results over the next couple of questions. I think we have maybe one or two more, but these are all anonymous, right? So you're not tracking this. Be able to tie these answers back to anybody.
I'm not gonna. I don't know who votes what. Your answer is your answer.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, that's funny that you said. I didn't even realize, that the numbers were low there. But I guess like you said, well, we only have one more question, I think. So, but go ahead, go with question number 5, please. All right. So benefit. Now, we got 2 more questions left. So if you have some type of UAS system set up at your, or program, should I say, set up at your airport, have your airport or your community benefited from it? Meaning maybe you created more jobs or, of course, a safer environment. So again, and this one, I see we're saying yes, about 11 people out there saying yes. If you wanted to put in the Q&A, maybe how have you benefited from it? How have your airport or your community benefited from it? And then that might give us an idea of what direction we're going with this.
Eric, it's amazing the benefit drones can bring in areas you might not realize. As Oklahomans, we have this small thing called the Mesonet, which hopefully all of you are aware of. The Mesonet is actually starting to do research right next to my airport in coordination with us and our air traffic control tower for launching drones from Mesonet stations, not now and not in the next 5 years, but in the future, to be able to take weather sample data from the surface to around 2,000 to 3,000 feet. Because weather balloons really don't start collecting accurate weather data until around 2,000 to 3,000 feet. So lots of good uses coming out of drones from all aspects: aviation, weather, construction, safety, GIS, all these areas. So
good deal. Thanks, Lance.
Yeah.
And it's curious to say now, Lance, for people for this particular presentation, were they able to call in as well? Because I'm thinking that maybe they aren't at a computer where they can poll, so to speak. So maybe they're just listening in. So maybe that's why we're not getting the high numbers.
I have some phone calls on here, but the majority are computer.
Okay, no problem. And I know we're coming up on our time. So this, go ahead and show the last question. There we go. No, number 6, please.
Sorry.
All right. Okay, and this is just, again, we're just trying to figure out what other resources, what other information are you interested in? Mike had talked about the UTM and the mobile and urban air mobility. So is that something that you would like for, to hear more information on, or we go more in detail as it comes along? Let's see, we have another comment. Police department and fire here have drones, and they'll be useful during incidents here. And appreciate that comment, or that input, because we are doing some testing at some actually some facilities, some ARF training facilities, and those the testing that we're going to be doing is dealing with, or one of them is dealing with the incident, after incident reporting and stuff. So that will help us out there. So, but all right, Lance, I'm at the 2:40 mark. So I don't know if you guys are on a strict timeline or not, but that is it for my questions.
We are, unfortunately. So Mike, Gio, Eric, thank you very much for hopping on and talking with us today. I know I learned a lot, and I hope a lot of the other airport managers and consultants across the state of Oklahoma have learned something as well. UASs are not going anywhere anytime soon. As a matter of fact, they're going to be integrated more and more into our daily lives, whether we like it or not. So we better get used to it and figure out what's going on from our side of things so we can make sure we operate a safe and efficient environment for our airport. So thank you very much, gentlemen. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Lance.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Mike, if you don't mind to unshare your screen. Thank you, sir. We right at time here, so I'm going to make this go really quick. One big, huge thank you to Park Hill for sponsoring this wonderful session. The waypoint finding code for this session is no pilot. All one word, just like UAS, no pilot. We also have one gift to give out from Park Hill, another wonderful Oklahoma, made in Oklahoma gift basket. The winner of this gift basket is Mike Bailey. Mike Bailey from Bartlesville. Congratulations, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you joining session 6. Join us very shortly here in about 8 minutes to start session 7, which is navigating the state capitol and its importance to your airport. Thank you. And we'll get started with session 7, which is navigating the state capitol and its importance to your airport in about 7 minutes. Grayson, you're welcome to leave your video on if you'd like, or mute yourself for the next 7 minutes. It's up to you. I'm waiting on Monty to show up to be able to promote her. So I'll keep an eye out for her.